Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah, this is recording already. Recording, okay. All right, so how do you take the test? Oh, that's a good question, Firdausa. So the test is available to you. You take it at any time. Like, so I will do my best to post it 2-3 days after the class itself. So, and the test, the way it's made is that it's questions. What I would recommend is that you study, try to take the test. If you get stuck, go back to your notes, review again. But then 2 pages down, I put the answer key, right? So a lot of it will depend on whether or not you actually took notes while what I was talking, because some things I'll tell you like where the answer is, but the answer might just be like, look at that slide. This is when we talked about it. What notes do you have to refer to? So you could take it at any time. You don't really have to tell me about it. I'm just encouraging, and sometimes I might take a question and review it. So today I wanted to do that. If anybody has a question they want to bring up and we can review, because there's a couple of things we talked about last week and maybe we will connect it to what we're talking about today. So as long as you take it before the next class, that's great, inshallah. Taking it before the next class. All right, so I'll go ahead and start. Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbana zidna ilma. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teach us that which will benefit us with what He teaches us, and increase us in beneficial knowledge. Ya Rabbal Alameen. Let's set it up so everybody is muted. How come? Yeah. Everybody should be muted. And if it doesn't automatically mute you, just make sure you do that, please. All right, I'll start. All right, let's read the verses. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. All right, so these are surahs that, alhamdulillah, we have memorized from the time we were small children, right? If you, were born a Muslim or you grew up in a Muslim home, these are the verses that we hear all the time. Surah AlIkhlas is known, like the literal translation of Ikhlas is sincerity, and AlFalaq and AlNas are always referred to as Al-Mu'awwidhatayn, the 2 protectors. So I just put them down here as the protectors, but if you hear the words Mu'awwidhatayn, those, like we're speaking about Surah Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Nas and Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq. So Surah Al-Ikhlas, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts with saying Qul, say, telling Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to call others to it. So here's the English translation. I'll just go briefly over it. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say, He is Allah, the only one. Allahu Samad, Allah the Absolute. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He begets not, nor was He begotten. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. And there is nothing comparable or equal to Him. So think about this, right? Now, the whole surah does not mention the word ikhlas, but the name of the surah is ikhlas, sincerity. And when we read it, we don't like, I want you to think about what does sincerity mean to you, and think about like, how are we coming up with sincerity, or the topic of sincerity, which is one of the most important principles when it comes to our worship. How are we coming up with it from these words that we don't, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not actually refer to the word ikhlas. So that will come up inshallah in the explanation, but I want you to think about that. Like right now, what does the word sincerity mean to you? What is it, when you ask yourself, am I being sincere? What are you thinking about, right? So this surah, we're going to go over the surah facts. Is it a Makki surah or is it a Madani surah? And we talked about what Makki and Madani means. So Makki was it revealed in the first era of the da'wah, like the first 13 years that Prophet Muhammad actually lived in Mecca, or was it revealed in the Madani era, the next 10 years after he immigrated to Medina? There is a difference between the scholars about it. Majority of the opinions say that this surah was actually revealed in Mecca. The reason why there is a difference of opinion is because there's two different narrations. There is a narration that the reason why this surah was revealed is that the kuffar of Quraysh, the disbelievers in Quraysh who were challenging Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, they asked him, tell us the lineage of your Rabb. So you know how like in the Arab, in that culture, lineage and your tribe was very important. So they wanted to know this Rabb, this God that you're telling us to worship Him alone, tell us His lineage. Like who is He? Who's His dad? Who's His father? Where's His ancestors? Who are His children? Who's He? You know? So then Allah revealed the surah to introduce Himself, to say like, this is who I am. And He's telling Muhammad, say to those people. And say is also like, make da'wah, like call others to this God, right? So and then the other narration mentions that it was the Jews in Medina that asked that question. So it could be that the surah was revealed in Mecca because the Quraysh asked, but then when he went to Medina, that also the Jews also asked, and they said, tell us the lineage of this God that you are calling us to. So Allah answers, and Allah does gives the answer Himself. He says, this is who I am. And then we will talk about how does He introduce Himself. So what are the objectives of the surah? What is the surah intending to teach us? Who is Allah? What do we need to do based on this knowledge that we will get about Allah? And then dispelling the claims made against Allah by the Jews, by the Christians, and by the kuffar of Quraysh. The kuffar literally means disbelievers of Quraysh, those who were rejecting. They were pagans. They worshipped idols, right? So the reason why we bring that up is because Allah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts, He says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say Allah is Al-Ahad. Now, the name of Allah, Al-Ahad, means the only one. I know Ahad sounds like something single, or sounds like you're saying number one, but literally Al-Ahad means the only one. And He has no partners, no one else worthy of worship besides Him. And the significance of it, remember when Bilal radiallahu anhu, Bilal ibn Rabah, when he was being tortured by his master, and he was telling him to leave this path of Muhammad, to leave this religion religion of Islam, he would put the rock on his chest in the middle of the desert, and he would, whenever he lifted it up, Bilal would go back and he would say ahadun ahad, and his, like, the reason why he would say ahadun ahad, he wanted to make Umayyah angry by saying there is no other God. He is the only one. Because the Quraysh, when they worshipped these multiple gods, to them it was like, no, we know that there is a God who created everyone. We know that there is a God who created the heavens and the earth. But then we worship these other gods to get to him, right? That, yes, like, they're important. And they would say about Allah himself that he had the angels were the daughters of Allah. So they would attribute children to Allah. So before, going into depth about this, I remember thinking, I only thought it was the Christians who said that that God has a child, referring Jesus to be the son of God. But then in the Quran, Allah talks about how the Quraysh used to say that God, we have the sons and God has the daughters, meaning the angels are the daughters of Allah. And they would say it in a way that is demeaning, because in their culture, having girls was not like praiseworthy, but having boys and having sons was something to be proud of. So Allah says, like, look at their logic. Like, they give God the girls and they give themselves the boys. And also in the Jewish tradition, or what Allah says in the Quran about it, is that وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ عُزَيْرٌ إِبْنُ اللَّهِ, and the Jews said Uzair is the son of God. And who's Uzair? He is a man who God mentions, like, he was traveling one day with his donkey and his food. He was a righteous man, and he wondered, how does Allah cause people to die and come back to life? So Allah made him die, like sleep or die for 100 years, and then he resurrected him. And then he asked him, look around you, like, if you are still in the state that you were in, but it has already been 100 years. So when he went back to his people, they knew there was a man who left and he never came back, who, and he had the knowledge that, so the Jews looked up to him because he had knowledge that was missing from them, like from 100 years ago. So they respected him and they loved him to the degree that they eventually called him the Son of God, right? And then we also know in Christianity, and we will actually spend more time talking about that later, is how Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, was a prophet of God, born to Virgin Mary, and then he was a prophet. He was, calling to worship only Allah, and then at some point he was also determined to be the Son of God, like equal to God, same as God. So there's all these things that Allah is trying to dispel by saying, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, right? So knowing that, why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizing this? It's knowing what are the people saying, what are the different faiths and traditions and the groups and the communities that Muhammad is interacting with, what are they saying, okay? Now, so al-ahad basically means that only one, nothing like, there's nothing like him, no one else that is worthy of worship with him. He's the only one, not even yourself, right? Not even yourself. And I'm going to emphasize a little bit about that in a little bit later. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, and he further explains himself by saying, Allahu Samad. Allah is a Samad. What does the word Samad mean? Now, Samad in the Arabic language has so many different meanings, and the Tafseer had so many different definitions of Samad. But Samad is basically the one that everyone turns to for all their needs. The one that is like the master or the Sayyid that reached the highest level of mastership. Like there's no one above him. The Arabs would call, when they respect someone, they would call him Hada Samad. Like this guy is the Samad in us, meaning he is like the most noble amongst us. Right? And then also it means the person that feeds and takes care of others, but then doesn't eat themselves. They don't have the need to do that. It also means the person who has been perfected in all of their qualities. Every quality they have is completely perfect. Therefore, based on all of that, and this is what Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says in the Tafsir. So I'm going to explain something. Anytime we say Ibn Abbas, said, now when Ibn Abbas is seen as the mufassir of the Quran, as the one who explained the Quran. Of course, he's a human. The Prophet ﷺ made a special dua for him that Allah teach him the ta'wil of the Quran, the understanding of the Quran. So, like the majority of the mufassirin are his students, and when you're reading a book of tafsir and it says Ibn Abbas said, then he is really seen as the biggest authority when it comes to the understanding and the explanation of the Quran. And I remember asking Sheikh Yasir Birjaz one time, because he talked about how the Prophet asked him a question about the Quran and he knew the answer, and he was very young. And so the Prophet, he said this to him, and he said to him, may Allah give you a long life, and may Allah teach you the ta'wil, the understanding or the explanation of the Quran. So I remember asking Sheikh Yasir Birjaz, was this something like he learned from the Prophet, or was it a gift that Allah gave him? How did he explain the Quran? Was it an inspiration? Was it like a deeper insight that Allah gave him to be able to understand, to explain the Quran? Or was it like he was present when the Prophet was explaining it? And Sheikh Yasir Birjaz said it's both. So it was like knowing, he accompanied the Prophet to know, and Allah also gave him that extra insight to be able to understand and have a solid explanation of the Quran. I remember also there's a story about him where when he was young, even Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu would have him come and sit with the major Sahaba, the older Sahaba, and he was a young man. So he would ask everybody a question, and he would ask Ibn Abbas and show them that they were wrong and Ibn Abbas knew. Because they used to think we're all older, why is this kid sitting amongst us, But then that was a level of knowledge that Allah had blessed him with, and the Prophet ﷺ had made extra dua for him. And may Allah give us that, right? We can also make that dua Ya Allah, give me an insight in the Quran. Give me the ability to see what you are intending for me to know and learn, right? So that's a side thingy. And then he is the one also, Allah as-Samad means he is the one who is free of all human imperfect qualities, like eating, drinking, having children, and being born to somebody. Why do I say imperfect qualities? Because, and lam yalid wa lam yulad will further go into that, is basically, if you are in need of eating, just we talked about Allah when he says he's not in need of sleeping or he doesn't get tired in Ayatul Kursi, same thing. Eating means you need fuel. Drinking means you need fuel. And if you eat and you drink, it means that you also go to the bathroom, that you have to release yourself. And this is why in the Quran, when Allah speaks about Maryam alayhi salam and Isa, Jesus, he says, Maryam and Isa were only human beings. They used to eat the food. And the implication is they eat food, they go to the bathroom. They have human needs, right? God, the creator, the sustainer, is not at that level. He is not a human being. He is not in need to relieve himself or to fuel himself. So that's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emphasizing. Now, where does the idea of ikhlas, of sincerity, come from? Knowing that Allah is as-Samad, knowing that everything that we have said about the meaning of the word Samad, then it only makes sense that when you are truly in need of something, you only go back to Allah. That whatever it is that you need, you go back to Allah, knowing that it can only come from Allah. And that's where the idea of sincerity to Allah comes from. Now, last week with Surah Al-Fatiha, we talked about إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, you alone we worship, you alone we ask for help. And this further goes into that, because Allah is as-Samad. How do I worship Allah? I am only seeking His pleasure. I am only seeking to please Him. I am only seeking to, what's your deepest intention? What's your deepest purpose? When you think about ultimately, when you keep getting down to the why do you want to do this? Why is this important to you? Why do you want to do this? Or why do you want to avoid this? if you get down to the deepest, it has to be Allah alone, nobody else, and not even ourselves. And sometimes we are trying to please ourselves, like our ego. Like, I want to have that degree because I am, like it's going to give me a position. It's going to give me, I want to have all these children because they're going to take care of me when I get older. And this is like, there are people that have children simply for the idea of, I'm going to be taken care of, or I'm going to travel to such and such country because, like, I'm going to be the cool person. So I'm trying to gratify my own self. But then if I were to do everything for the sake of Allah, if I were to, let's say, avoid something for the sake of Allah, we talked about the idea of fear, that how it's human nature. And say, for example, like Allah has given you a certain knowledge, a certain ability, and you want to go and give it and share it with others, but then you have fear of, like, let's say the crowd, or you have fear of putting yourself out there. But then Allah gave you this ability and you're like, I'm going to overcome this fear for the sake of Allah. So I'm going to seek Allah in that journey of overcoming it, not because I'm going to overcome it because I want to be confident and I want to be sure of myself. It's not about us. It's about Allah. It's not about others. I'm not going to do something because of the society, of my family, of my community. I'm going to do it sincerely for Allah. Now, if we live our whole life with the concept of sincerity, then we have succeeded. Right? We have succeeded. Now, something else, I don't know if I have it in another slide. Let me just make sure, because I don't want to repeat myself later. Okay, maybe I have another slide that will address it. But basically knowing that as human beings, like for our worship, for anything to be accepted from us, is that we have to only intend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A man came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam and he said to him, like a man, or me, like he's talking about himself, like a man would go to war for the sake of Allah, and he will do it for the sake of Allah and to be praised, to be mentioned in high esteem. And the Prophet said to him, it's not acceptable. The man repeated it. A man will go to fight for the sake of Allah, and to be praised. And then the Prophet said, it's not going to be acceptable, because Allah will not accept that you have two intentions. If there is like, and if you intend Allah, then you only intend Allah. If you intend anything else other than Allah, then Allah is not going to accept it. And this is really interesting, because for worship, for ibadah to be accepted, the number one principle is that you are completely sincere. And now this is something that is very hidden, right? It's very hidden. It's definitely hidden from human beings like other people, but it could also be hidden from us, right? And so that requires that we become aware. And a lot of what this surah and the next surahs are going to talk about is like, how aware are we? How aware are we to the internal conversations that we're having with ourselves, with the internal thoughts that we're having? And do we know how to put them in the proper place, in the proper category? So for example, I am going and I'm, let me see, like for example, I'm going to go and volunteer at a kitchen soup, for the sake of Allah. Right? And if I'm going for the sake of Allah and then obstacles come up, I'm now going to get upset over these obstacles, because at the end of the day, I was doing this for the sake of Allah. It wasn't about my time being respected. Of course, we want, things to be done properly, but I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to be angry if I'm not praised that I did it. I'm not going to get angry if a person did not mention me as one of the people that attended. I'm not going to be like, let's say I do go there and everything falls apart. I'm not going to be upset. Why? Because I was intending Allah, and in intending Allah, I know that He's already given me reward for what I was trying to do, for that intention. But if I'm trying to please myself, then I'm thinking about, has it been done? Can I just put a check mark on it? And if I'm thinking about the check mark, then it's like we're not 100% there. Now, something important to remember too is that we're human beings, and sincerity is one of the most difficult things to attain in our deen. The scholars used to say that Of all the obligations, sincerity is the most difficult one. Every time you think you have it, it changes up on you. So it's something you constantly revisit, you constantly fix, you constantly recheck, you constantly renew. And there are opportunities every single day where we can do that. And inshallah, that's the dua that I'm going to share with us later. Let me make sure I go back to my notes so that I didn't forget anything. I mentioned all of that. All right, so in this section, we were talking about the names and attributes of Allah. So Al-Ahad and As-Samad, and then Allah, right? And so remember we said that the power of the Quran, or the call of the Quran, it wants us to go back to Allah. It wants us to recognize Allah. So in doing that, Allah is always sharing with us who is He, right? So the Prophet ﷺ tells us in an authentic narration or hadith that that God has 99 names, 100 except one. And Allah has actually more names than that and more descriptions than that. But then in this hadith, He only mentions those 99. And He says, whoever memorizes them, whoever man ahsaha, whoever enumerates them or memorizes them, will get into Jannah. Now, what is the correct understanding of that hadith? How do we approach the names and attributes of Allah? Do we only memorize it? No. We memorize it, we understand it, and then we act upon it. We worship Allah based on that. And then in our human interactions, in the way we interact with people and with others and with ourselves, we try to live that. Okay? So what does that mean? What does that look like? Like right now we talked about As-Samad. And As-Samad is the one that everybody goes back to. He fulfills the needs of others. What comes from that is the idea of that a human being, yes, we need help sometimes, but as much as we can to rely on ourselves, as much as we can to depend on ourselves, to put our trust in Allah, seek Allah, and then do what we need for ourselves. So for example, I think it was either the Prophet ﷺ or Abu Bakr. If he's riding on his horse and something drops from him, he would get down and he would pick it up himself, even though the person next to him can reach it for them. Is that something we're obligated to do? No. I could ask, my son or my husband, can you please grab me that cup of tea, that cup of water? And it's perfectly halal. There is nothing wrong with it. But then the perfection of understanding that I'm going to rely on Allah and depend on myself as much as I can will mean that I'm going to try to do things for myself, right? That I'm going to leave the needing of anybody else to a dire situation and important, I really need the help right now, And I know we live in a culture yes, ask for help, and we should ask for help, but sometimes doing it yourself out of I'm trusting in Allah and I'm going to do what I can for myself is a good quality, is a quality of understanding As-Samad properly, right? So and obviously it's not something that we kill ourselves over, we're working on it. We're trying our best to get there. There's a dua where, when somebody is in debt, they say, Allahumma, when someone is in debt and they want to get out of this debt, the dua basically says, oh Allah, suffice, Allahumma kfini bihalalika an haramik waghnini bifadlika amman siwak. Oh Allah, give me, suffice for me the halal, make it enough for me and make me not in need of anyone other than you. So yes, I could go get a loan and there's nothing wrong with that. It's completely halal. But before I do that, I'm going to try my best to trust or to depend on my own self and my own capabilities. And then if it gets to a place where I can no longer do it, then I'm going to go and ask for help. So this is, how to perfectly understand. So when it comes to the names and attributes of Allah that He teaches us in the Quran about Himself, there are 4 ways to live them so that we could get the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ or the reward of Jannah, is to memorize it, to understand it, to worship Allah based on it, and then to, as much as we can, embody that character in our own behavior, in our own character, like live it ourselves in the way that we interact with ourselves and with others. Okay. Okay. All right. Perfect. So if you're wondering what is it that I'm looking at, I usually print, and I don't have a working printer in my house. But basically, these are my own like teacher notes that I'm following through, just to make sure that everything that I wanted to discuss in this slide is on there. All right. So the next ayah. Then should I come back for questions and answers just to make sure? Stop sharing. All right. I don't see any Q&A. So what I'll do, I'll just continue. If there's any question and answer, go ahead and type them in there, inshallah. And then I will stop when I see that. All right. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the next ayah, he tells us, Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He begets not, nor was he begotten. Basically, like, means neither was he born to somebody, and he wasn't born to somebody, and he does not give birth to somebody else. Negating both, like this does not happen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he speaks about it in the Quran, he speaks about it like this is not even befitting. That he says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالُوا اتَّخَذَ الرَّحْمَنُ وَلَدًا. They say that Allah, Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, has taken a child. And based on what they say, the heavens and the earth are about to crack because of how serious it is, you know. وَتَخِرُّ الْجِبَالُ هَدًّا. Like, and the mountains are about to crumble because of how like horrific this is. And this is when they say, like we say, Subhanallah. Allah is far removed from such imperfection. Why? Why is this so dangerous? Why is this so important? Why does Allah take that as the highest level of insult? Because you're giving him human characteristics. You're saying that there was a time where Allah did not exist, and that there was a time might come where he might not exist. And if we go back to the meaning of who Allah is based on Ayatul Kursi, he is the sustainer and he is the ever living. So if there was a point in time where he wasn't around, where he didn't exist, then how can I trust that I have a God who will always take care of me, who will always sustain me? How will we trust that the heavens and the earth will not crack, they will not fall apart, because that God was temporarily unavailable, that temporarily he might have died, or he was busy giving birth, or he was busy with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَنَّا يَكُونُ لَهُ وَلَدٌ وَلَمْ تَكُنْ لَهُ صَاحِبَةٌ. How will he have a child when he never had a wife, when he never had like a female companion, you know? So you're also saying that Allah needs a companion. And what's interesting is, like, when I read the story of Adam alayhi salam in Ibn Kathir, and Allah Ta'ala, obviously, like Ibn Kathir, Qasas al-Anbiya, the stories of the prophets, he said that when Allah created Adam, he created Adam by himself, and he was in Jannah, he was enjoying himself, until a time came where Adam felt lonely, where Adam needed a companion. So that's when Allah created Hawa, because Adam he couldn't stay without the companionship of somebody else. And this is the nature in which Allah created us, and he created us to want to be with somebody. So when he created Hawa alayhi salam, and he asked her, like, who are you? And he said, she said to him, I am a woman, and Allah created me, and he made me your companion. So I remember reading that and go like, oh my God, this is so sweet, mashallah. But but subhanallah, like it shows you, like as human beings, we need one another. We can't be without each other. Like a man is in need of a woman, and a woman is in need of a man. And and then once a man and a woman come together, they also, this human characteristic is that we also want offsprings. We also want children. Why do we want children? We want children to love them. We want children to actualize like it's like the highest level of expression of love. We want children so they can inherit us. We want children to carry our name. We want children to carry the name of the whole tribe and for the humanity to continue. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it a natural human desire. But is Allah in need of any of that? No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in need of any of that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to him, he's the Malik, he's the Malik. He is the owner of everything. So he's not going to die. He's not going to go anywhere. So everything, it belongs to him now, yesterday, and tomorrow. So forever, everything belongs to him. So when we say things about Allah that like he has children, or that's the son of God, or that God could not have erased the sins of, like he could not have forgiven the sins of human beings, so he took his own child and sent it to earth so that he can, forgive. Or that, the Quraysh, what they used to say is that God is so amazing and so perfect, we can't go to him directly, we need to go to these gods, and they would, to these other gods, to go through God, to go through Allah. And they would these are things that are not befitting to God. You speaking about Allah in a way that is not befitting to him. And so in the Quran, he explains himself and he says, this is who I am and this is how I would like you to worship me. Because you don't, how would you feel if somebody came and spoke for you and said, so for example, Firdausa, she likes to do things this way. This is what she cares about. These are what's important to her. These are her values. You would probably feel like, who are you to speak for me? When did I tell you this? If Ayan, if you did something and somebody said, this is why she did it, you're going to get upset. You're going to say, why would you speak for me? Like, I'm here. I can speak for myself. And then on top of that, what they say about you is not even correct. So do you see why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gets so angry about this is not befitting and I'm not going to accept this. And this is, he's going to constantly send prophets and messengers to take people back to Allahu Ahad. Allah is al-Ahad. He is the only one. Allahu Samad. You only need him. You don't need anybody else, So that's the significance of these ayahs. So another thing is, Allah, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. The Prophet ﷺ heard a man make dua with that. Allahumma inni as'aluka bi'annaka anta al-ahad as-samad alladhi lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. The man said, oh Allah, I'm asking you based on the fact that you are al-ahad, the only one, as-samad, the one who is absolute, alladhi lam yalid wa lam yulad, the one who begets, did not have children, or was not given birth to by anyone. I can't say that. The one who was not big, who did not beget, nor is he begotten. Okay, that makes no sense to me, but I'll say it anyway. So you get the point. And then لم يكن لك كفوا أحد. So when the Prophet ﷺ heard this man say that, he said this man made dua with the greatest name of Allah, by which when he's asked with, he answers. He definitely answers. So remember our discussion in Ayatul Kursi, Al-Hayy Al-Qayyum also could be one of the name, the name of Allah, the greatest name of Allah. This is another hadith. That's why the scholars don't have a firm, opinion that this could be one of those ahadith, that there are multiple narrations, and this is one of those narrations, right? So, but then what does that tell us? That tells us that at times we should also make dua like that knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when the Prophet ﷺ heard this man make that dua, and he said, you made the dua with the greatest name of Allah, then when I'm in need of something, then I'm going to use that name as well, and subhanAllah, this morning when I woke up, I think I might have used that name because I had I had the craziest pain ever. Like I had an attack of a pain. I really thought I was telling I was making dua that I don't have to go to the hospital. It was that bad. It was like on the side of my belly. I didn't understand where it was coming from. I laid down and I just kept on making dua with all the names that we have been talking about the past 3 weeks. And this is the beauty of studying, like tafsir and teaching tafsir, is that when I could forget, like we might not remember. I read Surah Al-Fatiha. I think the hadith said, like you read it 7 times. I think I read it 20 times. I just sat there. I'm like, ya Allah, like, let me get sick after 11 o'clock. Astaghfirullah. I don't want to be sick. I hope I'm not sick. But it was, alhamdulillah, I feel perfectly fine right now. It's just weird kicks and pains that come every once in a while. But knowing, like, having been talking about this and reading this and studying this and teaching this, it was right there. It was fresh in my mind. So alhamdulillah for it. Okay, so significance of the surah. I think we already talked about it. Reading it. So this is the part where we speak about the virtues of the surah. Like what else is this surah calling us to? So the Prophet ﷺ asked his companions one day, will it be too difficult for you if you read 1/3 of the Quran every day? 1/3 of the Quran is like, it's a whole lot, right? If you take the whole Quran and you divide it, and some people are able to do that. MashaAllah, tabarakallah. May Allah allow us to be of them. Ya Rabbil Alameen. And like if they did that, they would read the Quran in 3 days, which is the maximum speed in which you are allowed to read the Quran, in 3 days. But anyways, so the companions, they said, that's so difficult. How would we be able to do that? So the Prophet ﷺ said to them that reading Qul Huwallahu Ahad is actually 1/3 of the Quran. So the scholars explain, how is it 1/3 of the Quran? It's 1/3 of the Quran because that's what 1/3 of the Quran is about. It's about who Allah is and being sincere to Him. Who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, the qualities of Allah, the names of Allah, the attributes of Allah, the description of Allah, and how do you worship Him based on that. So that 1/3 of the Quran calls us to that. There's a man that used to lead people in Salah, and whenever he would lead them, he would read Surah Al-Fatiha, and then he would read Qul Huwallahu Ahad, and then he would read another surah. So then they complained. They kind of got like irritated, and they're like, why do you always do that? Just read Surah Qul Huwallahu Ahad, or just continue, like, just read any other surah. Why do you have to read it and then go continue to another one? And he said, if you want me to lead you, then I'm going to do this. So then they went to the Prophet ﷺ and they complained, and the Prophet called the man and asked, he says, why do you do this? And the man said, these verses describe Allah, and I love to hear the description of my God. And so the Prophet ﷺ said to him, because of your love of this surah, you are going to go to Jannah. Because of the love you have for this surah, you are going to go to Jannah. And he had this love for this surah because it described Allah. So may Allah make, beloved, to our hearts the verses that describe Him, the verses that tells us about Him, the verses that teach us about Him, what we need to know, what He wants us to know, that we specifically need, because with all the names and attributes of Allah, there's so many of them. But then there are some that I personally need more than you would need, for example, like, Lubna, or Sagal might need an ayah, or one of the names of Allah, more so than anybody else. So we connect with them differently based on different places we are at in our lives as well. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us love His attributes and His names, and make us people who live them. How did the Prophet ﷺ interact with the surah? So the Prophet ﷺ in the second rak'ah of Fajr, so the sunnah that you pray, the 2 rak'ahs that you pray before Fajr, those 2 rak'ah of Sunnat al-Fajr, they're like extremely important. The Prophet ﷺ said that that just the 2 rak'ahs of the Sunnah of Fajr, before Fajr, they were very short. So one rak'ah he would read Qul huwallahu ahad, in the other rak'ah he would read Qul hiya ayyuhal kafirun. And he would make it a quick salah. And he says that this is better than the whole world and what's in it. And you haven't even started praying Fajr yet, so imagine how amazing is Fajr, Allah make us people who love Salatul Fajr, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And the Prophet ﷺ would read it in Sunnah of Al-Maghrib. The Prophet ﷺ would read it in the 2 rak'ahs you make after you are done with your tawaf. The Prophet ﷺ would read it in Salatul Witr. The Prophet ﷺ would read it right before he went to bed. He would read it after every salah, and he would read it in the morning and the evening adhkar, which inshallah we'll probably do soon. Hopefully, do it this week or next week. I'll see, inshallah. But then those will also be just recordings that you can just go back to and listen to on your own time. You won't have to be in a class like this, even though I would love to do that, but won't take your time in that. And then as a healing, when someone is afflicted with harm or an illness, the Prophet ﷺ would read it, blow dry spit, and then wipe it all over that body or wherever you're hurting. And if it's time to go to bed, you wipe it all over your body. And so this surah, basically what is the significance of this surah is that this surah teaches us about what it means to be completely sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala respond to the claims of the Jews, the Christians, the Quraysh, the pagans who attribute children to him, or things that are not befitting for him? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in a hadith Qudsi, that mankind or human beings are harming me and they don't even realize it. They're hurting me and they don't even realize it. And they say Ya Rasulullah, Ya Allah, how could somebody hurt you? And then he says, they attribute things to me that are not befitting for me. So this kind of goes with what we were talking about earlier. No one, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in a hadith, it's a hadith Qudsi, so Allah is speaking, no one is more patient with insult. So even though we insult Allah to that degree and we say about him all these things that are not befitting for him, he still provides for us. He still takes care of us. He still gives us wellness. He is still sustaining us, and then maybe I should have had the slide above because I think I've talked about everything that is in it. This ayah is interesting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if there were more than one God if there was if there was more than just one God, the heavens and the earth would be corrupt, because what would happen naturally is that those gods will fight. I'm going to do this, no, you should do this, and then they would, obviously every God would want to do things their way. And we know this, the closest relationship you have with people, your parents, your children, your spouse, or your friends, or your siblings, when you're growing up, you're so close, but the simplest thing, let's get from one city and drive to another city, all the arguments and all the fights and all the debates and all the things that will come up, So imagine if there was gods ruling the world. So I remember when I said this to my teen students, and I never really studied Greek mythology, and the first thing they said, that's what Greek mythology is all about. There's all these different gods, and then all they do is fight with one another. And I was like, subhanAllah, I had even no idea, but they helped me understand that ayah. Saying the gods would fight. It's Surah Al-Mu'minun, sorry. Let me see. I don't know where I put those verses. Yeah, anyhow. So then I have the verse numbers and we can go back to them. All right, let me take a quick break, come back to you guys. All right, this time I do need to get something to drink. So let me know if you have any questions. Any thoughts that are coming up for you? Type them up in here. I'm going to grab water. Would I be able to recommend a good book? Yes, Samar, it's in your syllabus. There is and I'm gonna, if I update it, I'll let you guys know, because I have all these recommendations of books all the time. But there is a book I put in there. It's by Sheikh Salman Al-Auda. It's on Amazon, and it's called In the Company of God. I put the name of it and the author's name. If you just go on Amazon, type it in. It takes a while to get it. I actually gave away my last copy, and I want to get it again. I think I gave away two of them. I love that book. I absolutely love it. I wish I could find the Arabic one. There's an Al-Maghrib class that is taught based on that. It's called Legacy, His Majesty by Ammar al-Shukri. And it was an absolutely amazing class. But he said he used that book to teach from it. So I highly recommend that book, and it's in one of your recommended books, like to have it, to keep it. Whenever a name comes up, just learning it. And you don't have to finish it like at once. You can make it like something you study a whole year. Like you just read one name every day or every week, and you just reflect on it, think about it, and think about like, what does it mean for you? He gives you all of that. You know, it's an amazing, amazing book. All right. Why is the surah called sincerity? So we had talked about that. The slide, the reason why the surah is called sincerity is because the name of Allah, Al-Ahad, As-Samad. As-Samad specifically teaches us, like, let me share my slide. So if you look, the name of Allah, As-Samad, based on all the different meanings that As-Samad has, you only go back to Him. He is the one that everyone turns back to Him for all their needs. And Allah is teaching us that if you come back to me for all your needs and everything that I'm asking you to do, everything that you're trying to avoid in this world, then your intention is only me, then you have attained sincerity. That's why the surah is called Surah Al-Ikhlas. All right, so then, so what is the Nicene Creed? I'm not gonna have us watch this video, but if you click on it, you can watch it on your own time, inshallah. Basically, it's a video that shows us how in Christianity, how like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Jesus are looked at, you know, and how He is like the Son of God, same, like has the same qualities as God, is not separate from God. He is the same essence as God. And you know, like we know that it didn't happen like it wasn't when Isa alayhi salam was there. This is not what the people were saying about him. The Jews at the time were denying that he was like born to a Virgin Mary, but they were not saying that he was the Son of God. And the disciples who believed in him, they knew he was the prophet and messenger of Allah. And they, you know, but then subhanallah, at some point, and this is what happens with humanity, is that we are on the straight path, and then we slowly divert until we go the completely opposite direction. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends prophets and messengers to tell us, here's the straight path again. So 325 AD is when it was decided that Isa alayhi salam was divine, that he was the same as God. And we learned in one class, I think it was with Sheikh Abdullah Hakim Quick, that there was a group of Christians that were completely against this, that they did not agree with it, and they were prosecuted, and they ran away to an area in Tunis, like in North Africa, and they were called the Arians. And basically he did not believe, he believed that Jesus was created by God and not a divine being, which is exactly what we believe. And he was basically accused of stripping divinity away from Isa alayhi salam, just like the Jews were doing that. And so based on that, they were prosecuted. Another thing is, if you think about when you think about how the Islam of when Salman al-Farisi was becoming Muslim, he tells us, like, when he tells us his story, he kept on going from he was a Majusi, he was a fire worshipper, and then he saw a group of Christians worshiping Allah, and he loved it, and this is before Muhammad came, but it was closer to that time. So Salman al-Farisi left the worship of fire, like Majusiya. He left that and he became a Christian. He ran away from his father. And then he kept on being with one, bishop to another one, to another one, to another one. He would see good ones and he would see, like evil ones. I think the story mentioned one of them was just really a bad one, but the rest of them, were good, and they taught him good. And the last one of them said to him, I don't know of anyone that is on the same Christianity that we're on. So what I'm going to tell you is go to the land of the Arabs, because it's the time of a prophet. And so when Salman al-Farisi was in Medina, when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, because his Christian teacher said to him, a prophet is going to come. There's nobody else who follows the path that we follow. And Sheikh Yasir Qadi was explaining that path is that the Christianity that Isa alayhi salam was on, or the Christianity, like that, I don't want to say Christianity, but that, well, it is Christianity. So it's that path that Isa alayhi salam was on, Isa was the prophet of God. He was created by God, and he came to call to Allah, right? So when we are calling Christians specifically, because this is like the biggest group that we can think of today that would say like Allah has a child, is to recognize the importance and the simplicity of Tawheed, of making Allah one, and saying that Allah is only one, worship Him alone. You don't need to go through anybody else to get to God. Because if you look at it, the Christians would tell you, you need to accept Jesus as your savior so that you can be, so you could get salvation. So accept Jesus to get to the salvation that God has, and if I can't get to God by myself, right? So Allah is saying, no, you don't need any barriers. You don't need anything between you and me. You come to me directly. And that's what the message of Islam is. And if you listen to a lot of Christians and why they have accepted Islam, it's really because the simplicity of that idea and how the whole Trinity was not making sense to them, that it was just something that you have to have faith. You just have to have faith. And so recognizing that the Prophet ﷺ, at his time, there were Christians that accepted Islam. How did they accept Islam? So there was Adi ibn Hatim al-Ta'i, and when the Prophet ﷺ was calling him to Islam, he would focus on the similarities. He would say, there's only that one God, and then he would say, he said to him one time, the Jews and the Christians, they took their bishops as their gods. And then Adi ibn Hatim al-Ta'i said, Ya Rasulullah, we don't worship them. And then the Prophet said to them, they make the lawful and they make what's not lawful. And by following that, you worship them. So he would focus on that message. He would focus on the fact that when he was calling him specifically to Islam, he said something to him will it be too much for you to accept that the one God that you worship is the only one we go back to, and the only one that we worship. And then Adi was like really touched by that, and he accepted Islam based on that. Like, just put aside everything else. Like, it's all the one God who created you. That's the only one you worship. And then also when Najashi was accepting Islam, similar, like same thing. Abdullah bin Jabir, no. Ja'far ibn Abi Muttalib, I think it was Ja'far. He explained, like he read Surah Maryam, and in Surah Maryam he explained it, and as soon, like when Najashi heard it, he started crying, and he said, Jesus was nothing more than what they say. And what do we say about Isa alayhi salam? Is that he was the prophet and the messenger of Allah. He was of the best of them. He was born to Virgin Mary, but we don't also take him above his state and say that he was one with God, or that he was the child of God, or that he was the son of God. So going back to the simplicity of Islam and the Quran, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet ﷺ called other Christians to Islam. Now, this dua that I wanted to share with us is like the application of sincerity, right? And remember, we said that sincerity is very difficult, and we will struggle with it. We will always struggle with it, and we have to just accept it as something we will always struggle with. But continue the struggle, like that we don't stop. We don't ever leave an act because we're worried about our intention. Fix the intention and continue with it, because shaitan's goal is to get us to stop. So this dua, I heard in a lecture that Abdullah ibn Umar would always say it, would never leave it. And this is one of the du'as that we say in the morning and the evening. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika an ushrika bika wa ana a'lam wa astaghfiruka lima la a'lam. Oh Allah, I seek protection from you that I associate anyone with you knowingly, and I seek your forgiveness for what I may not be aware of. And that, like, this is why we said, like, if I were to put a camera or a this is something Dr. Haifa would say, if I were to put a magnifying glass or a camera to my intentions and I become aware of it, what does it tell me about me? How sincere am I? And it really isn't an easy question to ask ourselves. And it requires, like, it's a struggle. It's like climbing up a mountain, but we can do it. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal was once asked, is every hadith that you have ever taught, was it for the sake of Allah? And Sheikh Walid, I'll never forget, his voice is imprinted, like right here. He said that Imam Ahmad said, to say everything was for the sake of Allah is going to be very rare. Like that's aziz. He says, inna dhalika aziz. Like that is something very rare. And this is being said by one of the greatest scholars of Islam, right? Do we say he didn't have the right intentions? No. We say that he was a human being and he really lived this. His goal, he was protecting himself. He was asking Allah to be protected from having any lack of sincerity, but at the same time he was human and he was asking Allah to be forgiven for what he did not know. And so I love this dua. We say it in the morning and the evening to remind ourselves that we're human, and that our intentions are going to fluctuate on us, and that the more we strive, the more, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will appreciate and will reward us for that striving, and will eventually get us to a place. And realize, when we worry about our intentions, that's when our intention is actually good. But when we don't worry about it and we think we're good, that's when there's a problem, So we're done with Surah Qul Huwallahu Ahad. These are the reflections that you have. I would love to hear from you all. Like, what resonated with you most in this surah? So you could share it here. You could type it up. Or in the Slack group platform that I created, there is an area called Surah Reflections, and you could share that with us. If it's private, you don't have to, but it really would help all of us, and it would teach all of us, because we take we're all different human beings and different people and different experiences and different backgrounds, and so we take things, like we see things from a different perspective, and that perspective is going to help all of us. So I hope, inshallah, you don't shy away from sharing your reflections, sharing your thoughts, anything that comes up to you when it comes to this surah. And then the other questions that I have for you, and this is a question I hope to give you in every, I hope we ask ourselves with every surah. And Sagal, you said something in the Slack today about you're taking this class, and you're taking it a second time because you wanted to internalize it in your salah. And so when I'm praying, and this is something I wallahi do, like I know many of us, when we are in a rush, we go back to Surah Qul Huwallahu Ahad. We go back to Qul A'udhu Birabbin Nas, when we're praying. And it would be mindless reading if I'm just doing it because it's the fastest, it's the quickest thing, right? But if I'm reading it and I'm bringing everything that I know and I have learned about the surah while I'm praying with it, then it's fine. Then I've attained the purpose of reciting something that will rejuvenate my heart. So when you think about what is Allah teaching you about yourself, what is Allah teaching you about Himself, what does Allah want you to do with this knowledge, and then asking yourself, what is your ultimate purpose or intention when it comes to different areas of your life? So let's say in your career, in your relationships, in your parenting, in your spousal relationship, what is it? What is your ultimate goal? How is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what you are seeking? How is it? So asking yourself, why am I in this relationship? Why am I in this position? Why am I committed to this area of my life? Why is this legacy important to me? Asking ourselves. So the more we connect to Allah, the more sincere we are. The more our inspiration or our purpose comes from I want to meet with Allah to say, Ya Allah, this is what I did for you, then alhamdulillah, then we're good, And then another question that I thought with the surah, I don't have this many reflections for you for the other surahs, okay? I'll take it easy with that, with the other two. But basically, if you were to teach the surah to someone and think about the background of that person, whether it is faith and religious background, age background, or age background, are they young or are they old? What would you teach them? What would you emphasize to them? What do you how would you be conscious of what Allah says about Himself that He would want that person to know? And that goes back to the idea that the surah starts with the word qul, say, not just Muhammad, but all of us. We're all required to call Allah to this, call others to it. Qul huwallahu ahad. MashaAllah. Lubna said, love how this surah sounds majestic when recited aloud. True. I think I'm going to pay attention next time. Subhanallah. All right. My goal is to not go beyond 11, so I'm going to continue with the next two surahs, okay? So, Samad, yes, how it relates to Surah Al-Fatiha. Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You know how last week we talked about sincerity? There's a hadith that is usually mentioned. Last week we talked about when we said, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. There's a hadith we shared, and that hadith was it was a long hadith, but the part that we were thinking about was when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the Prophet ﷺ tells us that Allah continues to be in the support of someone as long as that person is in the support of somebody else, right? And so one of the most important hadith that we learn about sincerity is the three men that were stuck in the cave. It was raining, they were traveling, and then they wanted to seek shelter from the rain, so they went inside this cave. And then as they were in the cave, a huge rock fell, and it locked them up in the cave. So they realized, we're not going to be able to get out of here today. And so let each one of us make dua to Allah based on the best and the most sincere deed they have ever done, you know? And so each one of them brought up something, well, two of them specifically, actually three of them. They, each one of them, like the one said, a beautiful woman, he was about to, like a cousin of his that was in need, he told her, I will give you the money if you sleep with me. And when she only agreed because she was in desperate need. And then at the last moment, she said to him, like, have taqwa of Allah, like fear Allah, you know, don't like take this away from me. And he said to Allah, Ya Allah, I turned away and I left her and I gave her the money and I didn't get anything from her. If I only did it for you, then remove the rock. And a little bit of the rock removed. And then the second man said, I had two elderly parents and children. I got the milk one night while my children were hungry and crying for the milk, but I did not want to give the milk to my children before my parents. So I stayed up the whole night next to them, waiting for them to wake up. And I didn't want to wake them up and interrupt them in their sleep. Look at the level of kindness to his parents. And he basically said, Ya Allah, if I only did it for you, then remove the rock. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed the rock a little bit. And then the last guy was a businessman. And he said, Ya Allah, I used to have a farm and workers. And one day they all the workers came to get their pay or their salary. And this one guy didn't come, you know, but I kept his salary for him. And I didn't want to just keep the money for him. So I invested it in making another farm. And the farm grew bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just kept on taking care of it and doing all the manual work that comes with it. And then the man came back after years and he said to him, you never paid me my salary. Can I have it now? And so the man said to him, your salary is that whole farm. And the guy thought he was joking, but then he wasn't. Like he invested his money for him and he made it work for him. And he said to him, like, no, I'm not. Like, I invested it for you and that's all yours. The guy took everything and he didn't leave anything for the guy. And so in that, and he said, like, Ya Allah, if you know that I only did this for you, then remove this rock. And Allah removed that rock. And so the scholars tell us that the most difficult of those, like the situation of the three guys, is the last one, the one who invested all that money, because money comes with such a greed, and it's not a temporary one where like the first one or the second one, it wasn't like just one night or just one moment. It was like a long term, right? That he could have just given the guy money and say, well, this is my own money. But he made that intention to do it for the sake of Allah, and he just stuck with it. And each one of them is also like helping or supporting somebody else. So what I was going to ask us is to think about, when we want the support of Allah, do we invest in supporting others? And do we do it in such a way where we are so sincere, we have nothing to ever regret, but we also have everything to present to Allah? You know, if I were to give you an example, like a friend of mine is going through like a difficult time in her marriage, you know, and it might come to a divorce. And she has been like so patient. She said to me, if this marriage ever ends, I know I have given it my 150%. Like, I will have no regrets whatsoever. And she only did it. She would tell me, like, it was so hard because everything she had to overcome, it was like her ego. And it was like, she would say, like, you know, Ya Allah, I'm just going to do this for you. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to do this for you. And this was like the whole theme. Like, every time we talk about marriage, like, you know, I'm going to do this for Allah. I'm going to do this for Allah. And subhanAllah, like, it was like, if you ever did that, then you have that ability to make dua to Allah and say, Ya Allah, you know I am sincere to you. But if we are not paying attention to our sincerity and we're not aware of it, what are we, like, how are we investing in our akhirah? You know, because this is the one, like, we're all going to meet with Allah. We're all going to stand in front of Allah. So what is it that we're doing so that when we stand in front of Allah, we say, Ya Allah, I did all that for you. And Allah knows, like, no one will ever know your intentions other than Allah. Sincerity is one of those things that is only between you and Allah. Only between you and Allah. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to the best of these intentions, Ya Rabbil Alameen, ones that are completely sincere for Him. As-Samad is defined as the only one we turn our needs to. Also, He is perfect and imperfect. It's not befitting of Allah. Woe to those who ascribe humanistic characteristics of Allah. Yes, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala use us as guide and people who bring that light to others, Ya Rabbil Alameen. All right. I hope I can finish the next surahs. Okay. Regardless of what happens today, we're going to stop at 11 o'clock, inshallah. That's one of you guys gave me that feedback to stick to the time. And I'm going to do my best, inshallah. I struggle with that, but that's my intention. That's my goal. All right. In the next surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ, say, I seek refuge, I seek protection in the Lord of mankind, Malik al-Nas, the King of mankind, Ilah al-Nas, the God, the Ilah of mankind. From what? What am I seeking His protection from? Min sharri al-waswas al-khannas, from the evil of the sneaky whispers. Alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudur al-nas, the one that comes and whispers in the chests or in the hearts of mankind or human beings or people. Min al-jinnati wal-nas, of the jinn, like of that creation, the jinn, and of people, humankind, right? So in the next surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I put them together and we're going to explain both of them together. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the specifically merciful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, say, I take refuge with the Lord of the daybreak. I, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ, from the evil of what He created. وَمِنْ شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبَ, and from the evil of the darkness when it comes together, when it envelops the earth. وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ, and from the evil of those who practice sorcery, like magicians. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدَ, and from the evil of the envious when he envies. So is this surah Makki or are they Madani? There's also a difference of opinion. And some scholars say it's a Makki surah or a Madani surah, and you will see why. What is the purpose of the revelation? So there is this long hadith that I have in here for you, and basically what it's saying is that Aisha radiallahu anha, and this is an authentic hadith in Bukhari, okay? Aisha radiallahu anha says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam got sick. He became different. What happened to him is that he would think he had done something. So he would think he had maybe had relations with his wives, but he didn't. And he complained to Aisha, and he would say, Aisha, I'm not feeling good, something is not right with me. And then one day he said to Aisha, oh Aisha, do you know that Allah has advised me about the problem I consulted him about? So the Prophet ﷺ complained to Allah, and he said, yeah Allah, I'm having a hard time. The Prophet ﷺ couldn't do a lot of things. He became he became limited in his physical abilities, right? And then Aisha said, how did Allah answer you? And so the Prophet ﷺ used to get communication from Allah through his dreams. So the dreams of the prophets are they are actual, they're inspirations from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're real. They're not like the dreams of regular people, right? So he saw in a dream 2 men come to him. One sat at the top of his head, the other one sat at the end of his feet. And then they are talking to one another, and they say to one another, what happened to him? And then the other one says, magic has been done against him. He had sihr has been done against him. And then he said, who did it to him? And then he mentions the name, Labid ibn al-A'sam did it to him. And Labid ibn al-A'sam is a man who is in Medina. So when the scholars say these 2 surahs are Madani, they say it because Labid ibn al-A'sam is from Medina. Okay, the scholars who say this surah is Makki, they say it was revealed in Mecca, but then when this incident happened, they used those two surahs that the Prophet ﷺ already knew in the dream, and it was like it was fine. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't just now revealed. They had already been revealed, and now they are coming with another purpose. You get it? So then he said, how did he do it? And he tells him he took a comb, had hair of the Prophet ﷺ, and then he stuck it to pollen in a date of a date palm tree. And then he said, where is it now? And so he tells him it's in a darwan, and darwan was a well in the dwelling place of the tribe of Bani Zurayq. The Prophet ﷺ took a group of the companions. He went to that place. They found it, and when they took it out, it looked like as it was as red as the infusion of henna. And the palm tree, the date palm trees looked like the heads of the devil. So this is like the work of magicians, and what they do. They take things, and they take something that belongs to you. And in this example, it was the hair of the Prophet ﷺ and his comb, and then they do their sorcery around it, and they do it in a nasty way, like so they have like blood or like this henna-looking reddish stuff, and they put it in a place where it's difficult to find. So they go and they find this well, and they put it in there. They try to hide it so that it's not undone. Right? But then the angels came and they told the Prophet ﷺ where it was. And then the Prophet ﷺ, it had 11 different knots. And the Prophet ﷺ was taught to say, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. That is, what? The Prophet ﷺ was taught to say the 6 verses in Surah Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Nas and the 5 verses of Surah Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq, making it 11. And each knot he undid, he was reading one of those verses. Okay? So that's why these 2 surahs are considered as the protectors. Okay? So the objectives of these surahs, they are guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to human beings in how to seek protection. Call on Allah alone. Call on Allah alone. And that's why Allah emphasizes who He is, and we will talk about that. And then we're asking Allah to protect us from specific well-known evils. What are these evils? Number 1, the evil of the whispers from the shayateen and the humans, humans and jinn, right? So now when you hear the word, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 2 creations. He has the jinn, not just 2, like He has many more creations. But when it comes to who are the accountable creations of Allah, the humans and the jinn. The jinn were created before human beings, right? So the evil ones are called shayateen. Because the jinn, some are Muslim, some are not. The Muslims, same thing. Some are Muslims, some are not. Some are evil, some are not. So if they're evil, and the jinn, if they are not Muslim, they're all considered evil. But then human beings, sometimes they could be Muslim and they could still be evil, right? So human, like they could be evil as in like they work for shaitan. They are the voice of shaitan. They do the acts of shaitan. And shaitan meaning like something far away, removed from the mercy of Allah, trying to please Iblis and trying to misguide human beings, trying to misguide the jinn, trying to make sure you don't go to Jannah, right? So their purpose is just basically like they all they want to do is misguide, right? Or harm and hurt and bring harm us. So we're asking Allah to protect us from them. We're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from the evil of the creation. So number 1 is only in Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas. Okay, number 1 is only in Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas. Number 2 to 5 is in Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq. Okay, and so we're asking Allah in Surah Al-Falaq to protect us from the evil of the creation, from the evil of the night when darkness spreads, from the evil of the magicians and those who blow in the knots, those who do this kind of sorcery that the Prophet ﷺ was struggling with, and then the evil, and then the last one is the evil of the one who does hasad, who envies when he actually envies. So we're going to explain each one of them, okay? I'm gonna grab my charger, sorry. Okay, sorry. Thank you for your patience. So if you noticed that in Surah Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas, and this is like technical aqidah terms that we learned like when you study Aqidah 101, right? And this is like covered in Al-Maghrib, my first Al-Maghrib class ever. It's called Light of Guidance. Like, it was like really my best, you know, it's like it was the one that changed my life. But basically these terminologies, they're technical, but I'm trying to avoid the technicalities, but I also want you to know some of these technical stuff, right? And then what we'll focus on is that we say, like Tawheed is really important. Tawheed of Allah is extremely important. It's the central message of the Quran and the da'wah of Islam. So what does it really mean? How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teach us that in the Quran through His names and His attributes and what He says to us? So if you look in Surah Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas. So Allah mentions Rabb, Ar-Rabb. And who is the Rabb? We talked about it in greater detail in Surah Al-Fatiha, that basically He is the one that is the perfect creator, the owner, the nourisher, and sustainer, right? So we call this, the technical term for it is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, the making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala one in His Rububiyyah. What does Rububiyyah mean? What does this word Rububiyyah mean? It means all the actions that come to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the actions Allah takes towards His creation. Mankind, humankind. So it was brought to my attention that saying mankind is sexist. And I was never really aware of it. But I'm really trying to like stop using that. And it takes time. Anyways, so human beings, jinn, what do you call, like the animals, the heavens, the earth, the mountains, the oceans, every creation of Allah needs Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So any action coming from Allah is considered Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Malikin Nas, the king of the people. And in that one, we are learning Tawheed al-Asma'i was-Sifat, the Tawheed that Allah has the most perfect names and the perfect attributes. And so we know Allah is our creator. Allah is this perfect being that tells us all about Himself and who He is and what He does for us, and like describes Himself to us. And then therefore, based on those two, something becomes obligatory. What becomes obligatory is that Ilahin Nas, the God of the people. And we talked about what God means. It's the one who people love and they submit to, they venerate Him, they have that awe towards Him. And so that is what worship. So then Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, you're going to eat that? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Hoya. I will make it for you. Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah comes up from that, and which is, how do we submit to Allah? How do we worship Allah? What does that look like? So in Surah Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas, Allah uses all three, telling us, remember, Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas, you are seeking refuge in the one who takes care of you. And you are seeking refuge in Malikin Nas, the one, you are seeking refuge in the one who has the most perfect names and attributes. He is perfect, and His perfection has no limits, right? And then you're seeking refuge in the one you worship. Do you see why this is important? Like, you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on all those three understandings of his oneness, his perfection, and who he is, and our relationship to him and his relationship with us, right? What's coming from him and who he is, and then what is going from us towards him. How do we worship Allah? How do we show Allah that we have completely submitted to him? Does that make sense? So then that's why the Qul A'udhu bi Rabbin Nas is like half of it, Allah is telling us about him. When you seek this help of Allah, remember, this is who you're talking to. Now, what are you asking him to protect you from? You're asking him to protect you from waswasa. And what is waswasa? Whispers, negative thoughts. These thoughts that come like in your heart, and they basically make the falsehood beautiful. What is make falsehood beautiful? I don't want to say, like in Arabic it said يزين, like الباطل. I know how أبغى أسمعني كلام. Okay, Hoya, please. Imran, remember what our agreement was? أرض أبكي. What was it? We had an agreement, that's why I say no. Anyways, is the negative thoughts that like makes the false view. So somebody will think like I'm sitting there and I'm talking to myself and I say like I hear like I feel like negative thoughts coming to myself about myself or about somebody else. Like, oh, that person, they only intend evil for you. Like they just want to hurt you. Like they're negative. And where is it coming from? It's waswasa. It's like whispers there, and it's coming in your heart, in your chest. It's like in this area. It's internal. You don't even know if it's you or if it's not you. You don't know. Like, where is it really coming from? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this is like Allah created us, and He created us weak and susceptible to these types of whispers, okay? Or the whisper will come to you and it will tell you, you can't get this done, or you're not good at this, or that like something must be wrong with you because everybody is able to do this and you're not able to do it, or you will never amount to anything, or that you will always be lonely, or these are negative things. They are not real, right? But then they make that falsehood, I don't want to call it beautiful, but they make it seem like it's a reality, and it's not a reality. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, min sharri al-waswas al-khannas, from the evil whispers of al-waswas, the one who comes and whispers, al-khannas. What is al-khannas? When you remember Allah, when you say a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, it runs away. It leaves, it goes away, it doesn't, like it won't come back until you stop remembering Allah, okay? And this whisper can happen from human beings, and it can happen by shaitan. And Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says that the whispers or the thoughts or the negativities that come from people is actually stronger and worse than the ones that come from the shaitan. Because when a shaitan comes to you and you say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, I seek protection from Allah from the shaitan runs away, leaves. But then when it's a human being and they are telling you to do something negative, and you say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, what do they say? They say, no, I'm serious. Let's try. Let's check it out. Like they try to convince you even more. They don't go away. So Ibn al-Qayyim says that they are the ones that are like we need to make even a lot more like dua against, like, ya Allah, protect us from them. Where is it in my notes here? Okay. So what is this relationship with heedlessness? Because waswas happens when a person is not mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the relationship? When we are immersed in the dhikr of Allah, we get rid of all these, like, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub, that with the remembrance and the obedience and the submission to Allah, do the hearts find ease, peace, tranquility. right? And when we do less dhikr, when we are not very mindful of Allah, when we are heedless of Allah, whether it is remembering Him in our tongue, in our heart, and in our actions, then we are more susceptible to these negative persuasions, okay? We are more susceptible to these negative persuasions that take us away from the path of Allah. Dr. Hayfa Yunus, I once asked her, how do I know the difference between like my own negative thoughts versus the thoughts of shaitan? And she said to me, anything that takes you away from the path of Allah, then it's from shaitan, automatically. Anything that takes you away from the path of shaitan, it's automatically from shaitan. If anything that takes you away from the path of Allah, it's automatically from shaitan. Now, let's say you're like that whisper is telling you to commit something haram, to do something that you know is not permissible, or to like lash back at somebody, like somebody like mistreated you, and you want to like get back at them, and you want to do it in a very like evil way. All these different possibilities. It could be internal, it's about yourself, and it could be enticing you to do something external. So the more we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more we are freed from the impact of these whispers, because we're still going to struggle with them. Shaitan will still come to us in our salah, and he will still try to whisper to us to get us to be distracted, right? But then the more the stronger we become at our dhikr, the better or the stronger we become in fighting those negative thoughts. I was reading something and actually presenting it at a halaqah the other day. We were talking about how do you get rid of like anxiety, and the anxiety that comes to you at the time of stress. You know, like you have an exam, you have a paper to write, you have something to submit, or you have deadlines, or you have to be somewhere at a specific time, and you have to get a number of things organized before you do that. Or, you know, like you're dealing with multiple children and you're getting stressed out, like by just telling them, do this, do this, do that, do this. And it was talking about, it was a non-Muslim article. It was by this like professor, a psychologist who is he focuses on wellness. He was saying that meditation helps with that. Like the number one thing that helps is meditation. And for us, when we think about meditation, that's the dhikr of Allah, like the salah that we do 5 times a day. That's our meditation. But then he was saying that it creates like new pathways in your brain the more you do it. That not that your struggles and your issues or the stress that gives you the anxiety goes away, but that it actually makes you more capable of handling those situations, right? It's not that it gets rid of them, but it makes you stronger at handling them. I thought that was like powerful, subhanAllah, because like that's what like everything Allah tells us about the power of dhikr comes down to like making us stronger, not getting rid of the difficulties and the challenges. So I think we've talked about everything in this slide except for the last one. Now, waswas, when do you consider it a mental health illness, not just somebody who's struggling with whispers? So a man came to one of the scholars of the past, the Salaf, and he said to him, I make wudu like I will go and swim in a pool of water, and then I'm still going to feel like I don't have wudu. Like I feel like, no, your wudu is not right. So the scholar said to him, you don't even have to pray. And the man said, like, what do you mean? He said the Prophet ﷺ said that salah is not mandatory on a person who is like somewhat insane, you know, and that this is a sickness. Like this is, if you are doubting yourself after you have immersed yourself in water multiple times, then this is something above and beyond whispers of shaitan. You know, this is above and beyond saying, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. If somebody is constantly thinking the door is not locked and they go back 7 times to check the door at night, then this person has a condition, a mental health condition. And another sheikh, like another modern sheikh, was saying that, it's not something we come to the scholars for. We have to go seek help. We have to go seek psychological evaluations. We need to seek therapy. That this cannot just be say, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. Because this is, yes, you do that. You do your ruqya. You read your adhkar and everything. But then recognize that this situation is actually more, is more serious, and you need more specialized help. So then in the next surah, we say, قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ. Say, I seek protection in the Rabb of al-Falaq. And so daybreak is like when the sun is about to come out, when Fajr time, right? And then min sharri ma, so that specific time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is emphasizing that time period for us. So there is an importance to the time of Fajr, okay? And I'm not going to say more about it now. Inshallah, we'll come more to when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by specific time period. And then what are you asking Allah to protect you from? The evil of the creation, from the min sharri ma khalaq. Every creation of Allah carries the potential to harm. Whether it is this cup of water that looks so innocent, I can drop it, it can break, and the glass can, harm my body somehow. Or the water, as simple as it is, and this has happened to me before, it can spill on my laptop, causing me to pay $825 to fix it. That's shar that I do not want for myself. And it happened by something Allah created that had the potential of harming me. If Allah wills, the harm will happen to us. If Allah wills, we will be protected. I could be walking down the street and a car could hit me, or I could be protected. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can protect me. So every creation of Allah has the potential to harm us, whether it's people, objects, things, everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created. And then what is the mindset of a Muslim when it comes to these things? I love this hadith. I'm going to let you read it. But basically, it's Ibn Abbas, the companion we spoke about earlier, about how Allah blessed him with an understanding of the Quran. He was the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when he was young, between the ages of 7 to 13, because the Prophet ﷺ died when Ibn Abbas was about 13 years old. He was riding with the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ taught him this hadith. And I love it, because one, he's teaching a child what to think about Allah, and what is Allah able to do for him, and what is Allah able to protect him from. And we all know that children have fears. And I'm saying around the age of 3, children, if you look at children, books cater to toddlers and preschoolers, a lot of them address fear and monsters and something coming out of the bed, because they develop fears like something bad is going to happen to me. So what are we teaching our children from a young age, and how are we internalizing this in our heart? So the Prophet ﷺ tells them, "Oh young man, I will teach you some words of advice. Always remember Allah. Allah will protect you. Always be mindful of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, you will find Him in front of you, you will find His guidance in front of you. If you ask, only ask Allah. If you seek help, only seek it from Allah. And know that if everyone, the whole nations in the world was to gather to harm you, if Allah did not want it for you, then no harm will happen to you. And if everybody gathered to benefit you with something that Allah did not want for you, then it will not happen." And the Arabic is so much sweeter. It's رُفِعَتِ الْأَقْلَامُ وَجُفَّتِ the pens have been lifted. رُفِعَتِ الْأَقْلَامُ وَجُفَّتِ الصُّحُفُ. The pens have been raised and the ink has been dried. The pages are now dry. This is done. This is a done deal. There is no going back to this. If Allah does not will it, imagine now, how do we walk around the world knowing that the turmoil has increased, violence has increased, Black people are being harmed, Muslim women are being attacked, minorities and immigrants are being detained, their children are being taken away. It's if a person has this belief, regardless of what happens, they will know Allah has got my back. Allah has got my back, We could talk so much more about it. Number 3 is وَمِن شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبْ. In the first ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was bringing our attention to the time of Fajr, and now He's bringing our time So anything from Fajr until like the sun comes out until all the way when the sun goes down and the darkness overtakes everything until the Fajr. So the whole day, I'm asking Allah to protect me the whole day, okay? What are we seeking refuge in Allah? From the evil that comes out at that time. The Prophet ﷺ tells us, he said to Aisha radiallahu anha, "O Aisha, ask Allah to protect you from the evil of the night when it comes." Why? Because the shayateen come out at that time, right? The shayateen have a better ability to do their corruptions at night. Not that they don't do it during the day, but they have a better ability. That's why you see that crimes increase at night, not in the daytime, right? And that's what the Prophet ﷺ tells us, that if your children are outside and they're playing, it's best that if it's Maghrib time, bring them back in the house. And then say Bismillah when you're coming in the house. And another thing that we learn from the Sunnah is that the importance of going to bed right after Isha. That right after Isha is not the time to start hanging out and going out, and it's time to actually sleep, unless there's specific situations where of course it's halal to stay up, of course it's okay, but then that your habit is that you're home and you're sleeping, and that you're protecting yourself from the evils that can come out, in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, from the evil of the magicians, وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ, from the evil of the female blowers in the knots, okay? And I don't know why Allah, I don't know, I think there was a reason that I read, but I can't. Where is it? Where was it? That نَفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ, that they blow in the knots, and that's how the magicians do their magic. How are magicians even able to do any magic? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the jinn specific powers, physical abilities that He hasn't given human beings, right? He has given us intellectual abilities as human beings, and He has given the jinn physical abilities. So the things that they do is not out of their nature, but it is outside of our nature. And how they're able to do sihr is that they make a contract with a human being, and that contract is kufr. It's like disbelief in Allah, because the jinn wants you to worship him for them to do any services for you. So they have maybe next week I'll come back to this and explain more, but then it is considered shirk if you do magic, and it's considered kufr, because the only way the jinn will help you is if you do that. There is no, I was just giving these powers. No, there's no such a thing. You have to sign a contract with them. And what I remember Sheikh Yasir Qadi emphasizing in the Aqidah class is that sometimes their brain is not developed. They're like a big jinn will have the mental capacity of a 5-year-old child. So they want you to do tawaf around them, to magnify their status, just like you would do for Allah. They would tell you, go and slaughter a chicken and then take that blood and drink it. Things that are very nasty, that are very disrespectful to any faith. So any belief in Allah, whether it is Islamic, Judaic, or Christian, because magicians are everywhere. They don't want pure things, they want nasty things. So they want, how would you know this person is dealing with that? You see the nastiness. Sheikh Walid Basuni taught us how one time there was, they came to a masjid, and the masjid was everywhere was blood. So apparently that night before, a human being had signed a new contract with the jinn, and the jinn asked them to go disrespect the house of Allah. And how do you do it? Go smother it with blood, knowing it's najas, knowing it's not pure, or it's disrespecting the house of Allah and the things that magnify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anyways, we see magic in all cultures, in all societies. No one is immune of it. No, it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about it in the Quran, so it is real. And Ibn al-Qayyim says, if somebody is afflicted by sihr, it is like an illness. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was afflicted by it was in the affairs of his dunya. It was not in the affairs of his deen, because Allah protects that, since he is a prophet of Allah and he's receiving, like he's getting an angel communicating with him and he's getting the Quran. So Allah is protecting the Quran and the religion, but then when it comes to his affairs of the dunya, when it comes to his like regular normal things, that's how the shaitan or the sihr is able to impact him. So what do? We protect ourselves with Quran. We protect ourselves by reaching ruqya, but we also seek help, medical help if we have to, for the symptoms. So if someone did sihr on you, or they gave you an evil eye and you broke your leg, you treat your broken leg, even though that this was the cause, but you still have to go to the hospital, get something like wrapped around it and get it fixed and take some medication to fix it, and you do your ruqya. You read you protect yourselves with the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So how do you strike a balance? That you never strike a balance between believing in those unseen things that might have power and that or do possibly have power, and like belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and protecting yourself, is that you recognize that Allah is more powerful than all of this stuff, that nothing will harm you if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want you to be harmed, and that the way to, and like we have a whole slide on how do we protect ourselves in reading our ruqya, like reading our daily morning and evening adhkar, reading our Quran, and reading, and somebody could be doing all that and they could still be hit, and this is the qadr of Allah, like it happened by the will of Allah. So who will help you? Still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help you. The last ayah talks about, do you guys like those little images that I have? Like, I didn't want to remove them, but it was like, I didn't want to remove it. What is hasad? What is the min sharri hasidin idha hasad? 3 minutes. And I do want to stop. Okay. I will stop because I really want to get in depth in those 2 verses. Oh, how did I tell you, Summer, that my laptop was about to die? Okay, so there's quite a bit of questions. Carrie, you said, I hope I'm saying your name right. You said, can you share where we can find the hadiths? So I have the hadiths in the slides. But let me know which ones you're speaking about, and I will see if it's on there. If it's not, then maybe I could go back and add it. And then can I explain khannas again? Yes, khannas is the one that retreats, that goes back when you remember Allah. So the whispers come, and then you say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, it runs away. It's that weak, it goes away. But then it will come back again when, when like the mention of Allah, like, or we forget about Allah a little bit. I don't want to say a little bit, like it comes back, like you're in salah, it comes back. You say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, it runs away. Khannas is the one that runs away when you mention Allah. I was wondering if you could provide more supplemental ahadith for us. In the slides themselves, is that what you mean? I could do that. So the hadiths that I'm mentioning, are you saying include them in the slides? 2 of you now are asking. Yeah, you are saying my name correctly. Okay, Jazakillah khair, Kari. Or a separate document. Okay, I could do that. The ones that I discussed. Okay, so I'll think about which ones are the ones that I discussed. The ones that I felt like were most important, I kept them in the slides. But then maybe I'll figure out a way to put more in them in there, inshallah. So forgive me, I guess we did run out of time and I couldn't finish the last 2 slides, but next week what I will do is I will start with them, and then I'll just give you your test the week after, because like there's a lot of questions that come up with them, and there's a lot of things that I wanted to say and I don't want to skip them because they are important. So the last 2 slides, we'll go over them next week again, inshallah. Yes, I will do that summer, inshallah. A book of hadith. So I would recommend a specific book called the 40 Hadith Nawawi, and in the syllabus I recommended a podcast, but it's a podcast, it's not the book. But if you get the book and have access to the podcast, you listen to it, and it explains 40 or about 40, maybe like a few more, a few less, hadiths that are the most important ones that a person should know. The one that I shared with you guys today, at the bottom, I tell you where it's from. So the one by Ibn Abbas is actually included in the 40 Hadith Nawawi, or it's included in another book. So if you go to any bookstore and say like, I wouldn't recommend that you ask for any, I would just recommend that you ask for the 40 Hadith Nawawi, and then in your syllabus, you'll see the name, like the full name of it, and there's a podcast. So if you just Google that, or you go to a bookstore, you can actually find the book. وإياكي Carrie, وإياكي. All right. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. If anybody has to leave, you could go. I'll just continue reading some of the questions and comments here. All right, so assalamu alaikum. See you next weekend, inshallah. Okay. Aisha said, but the podcast is free. Yes, the podcast is free by Qalam Institute, which Sheikh Hussein Mufti Kamani. وإياكي Lubna, وإياكي. How do I want us to use Slack? So there's different windows. There's like the random, which is just discussions, things that come up for you. I have a whole list, like anything, it's just basically to connect with one another. And there was a specific question that I had in the random channel, which was like introducing yourself. There's a lot of us in here, and there's a lot that couldn't come, like don't come on the live, and they just listen to the recordings. But if we get to know one another, I think we will better be able to encourage one another, inshallah. So just connecting, and so go on there, introduce yourself. Who are you? I gave you, and I introduced myself, so you could just go according to that, or whatever comes up for you. And then there's a channel about surah discussions. So any reflections, any thoughts, any questions you have about the surahs themselves, like about the content of the course. And then the general section is about like course logistics, just course logistics. In the next couple of weeks, I'd like to take a poll from you all too, to see. I'm going to have to figure out how I can do that, inshallah. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. If you guys only knew how much dua I made that we can have class this morning because of AlFalaq, and Allah answers the du'as. Alhamdulillah. I'm so grateful right now that we're here, we're done. Hopefully, inshallah, it was a beneficial class. Yeah. There are no more. I'm going to stop the recording because, yeah.